Welcome to the Fancounters Celebrity Podcast. My name's Nick. Thanks so much for joining us this week. We've got a great celebrity guest for you today, but in true fashion, we've also got an opening act. So I want to welcome to the show Andy. Andy, you host the TNTL, Try Not to Laugh podcast. How are you today?
Doing great. How are you, Nick?
Doing good. I really appreciate you joining us. I was on your show recently, getting to talk a little bit about all the celebrity encounters, and I had a great time on your show. You host a very funny and interesting show, and so tell me a little bit about what you guys do over there at TNTL.
Well, I am one half of TNTL Podcast. My co-host Brandon and I, we do a weekly show. Comes out every Tuesday and Thursday, and it's comedy. It's a conversational comedy show in which we talk about various topics like being a dad, food, music, sex, basically anything that's on a 30-something-year-old male's mind.
30-something-year-old, I like that. But do you have celebrities on your show too?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we've had Bruce Valanche on the show. We've had Mark White from the Spin Doctors. I recently interviewed Scotty Morris from Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. So, a lot of actors, musicians, definitely. I wouldn't say A-listers as of yet, but definitely had some pretty well-known names on the show.
Excellent. And so what do we search for when we're looking for it? Do we search for Try Not to Laugh, or is it TNTL? How do we get to you?
Yeah, well, if you search Try Not to Laugh, you're going to get a lot of really cute animals hatching out of their eggs. So I would suggest TNTL Podcast.
Andy, thanks so much. We appreciate you being on Fancounters, telling us about the TNTL Podcast. Please go check out that show. You can listen to it anywhere where you listen to podcasts and subscribe to them. Now let's get to this week's show, but not before we tell you where you can find us on social media. Our brand new Instagram, which we just launched about a week ago or so. You can find that at Fancounters Live. You can email me at hello@fancounters.com. And if you want to join our big community, if you search Fancounters on Facebook, you'll find 29,000 people following our page and hanging out and talking about the episodes. But we have a very private Facebook group called Sharpie Nation on Facebook. Just search for that and we'll let you in. On the show today, we've got a very interesting guy. Not only did our featured guest this week have a role in Ford vs. Ferrari, opposite Matt Damon and Christian Bale, this young man also is very talented in the areas of comedy, rap, and paranormal investigations. We've never quite done a show like this before, with somebody who's got so many different aspects of their career booming all at one time, especially the paranormal. We're going to talk a lot about that today and hear about some crazy experiences. So if you don't believe in paranormal spirits and interactions, today we might just change your mind, because Pierre Giagnoli is here, and he's going to tell us all about the movie Ford vs. Ferrari and paranormal encounters. We're going to talk a little bit of comedy, and we'll end our show today talking about some Disney rap music. Stay tuned for all that this week on Fancounters.
Coming to you from nowhere near the entertainment capital of the world, this is Fancounters with Nick and Elizabeth on the Podfix Network.
There was this mob of people, and they're screaming my name.
Crazy fans.
Stop following me. Don't come around my house. If you do, the cops are going to be at yours.
If I'm having dinner with my wife, don't sit down at my table. Don't follow me into the bathroom.
Can I take a picture? We're going to, oh my God.
I think this guy wants to fight me. Ended up being a fan.
I'm the only one that's ever been on Sam Jackson and lived to tell about it.
Well, guess what? I have a big surprise for you.
That's why we call it Fancounters.
I don't think you're going to last on the air very long.
Pierre Giagnoli, welcome to Fancounters. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate you having me on.
You bet. Let's start with something that I was really fascinated about with you. The movie Ford vs. Ferrari was big at the box office before movie theaters shut their doors due to the coronavirus. So can you tell me about landing the role in that movie and maybe some of the highlights that you experienced on set?
It was kind of random. I was actually focusing a lot more at that particular time on my stand-up comedy and my music. So I hadn't done real big acting gigs for about 5 years, but I was kind of actively still looking for work. And I got a random call from a casting director. They found me on LA Casting. They said, I look real Italian. My name's Italian. Would I want to be part of this period piece, this feature film? They didn't tell me the project yet. You know, they keep everything under wraps early on. But I was like, yeah, sounds great. And they kept calling me back, and they asked if I spoke Italian, which I speak it fluently. They asked if I knew about cars, and I do. I've done a lot of work on my own car. So I had a lot of experience that just kind of worked if they needed me to do, a little extra, I guess, because it was supposed to be just kind of extra work, maybe a little featured. And I went in for my fitting and everything, and it was really cool. It's a film based in the 1960s, so they were really accurate. They paid attention to crazy detail, and it was really cool, like wear these old jumpsuits, for the Ferrari factory workers and pit crew that they used to wear back in the 60s. They really, designed that stuff really well.
Mm-hmm.
So eventually went to shoot for the first few weeks, and I played a Ferrari factory worker on the assembly line when Ford came to Italy to get ready to purchase Ferrari. And the first day of shooting, I got to do a scene with John Bernthal. It was kind of random, but I was the final guy on the assembly line, fixing the engine and kind of finalizing all the stuff on it. And then John Bernthal comes through, and they're showing him the factory, and they said, the final guy assembles, the engine right here, and we do the final touches, and me and John Bernthal have a little interaction, and then he goes off to the rest of the factory. So that was really cool because, in that moment, I got chosen to do that.
Yeah.
Hair and makeup came in and really did a bang up job, kind of making my face dirty, making me look like, a real factory worker in there working hard on the engines. And, I got to actually sit with John Bernthal. We talked about the scene and how we want to do it, okay, make sure you look me right in the eye. So that way, I know when to acknowledge you and say my line and blah, blah, blah. And then James Mangold came out. We shot it, like 4 or 5 times just to get the right angles and different stuff. And James Mangold came out and actually, physically directed me. He's like, okay, I want you to be really working on this engine, get in there and really be doing it. And then when John comes by, just acknowledge him, but give it a second, and just kind of set up everything. So it was a lot of fun. And that was the first few weeks. I went back the second week for shooting, but the scene was outside of the factory. So because I had been so heavily featured in the first week,
Sure.
They actually ended up sending me home after the first day because they said, look, we love you. Everybody thinks you're great, but we're going to send you home, and we don't want you to come back to set tomorrow, but, there might be some stuff in the future. So just, we may be in touch. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. That was a little disappointing, but at the same time, it's a good reason to not come back to set. You were on camera way too much, and just, chronologically, the way the scenes were set up, it doesn't make sense for me to be heavily featured inside the factory, and then if you saw me outside of the factory, which takes place before that scene. So that's why it ended up happening. But I thought it was a good reason to not come back to set. You were on camera way too much, and I'm like, okay, that's kind of a good reason to not come back.
Well, and you didn't get cut out of the film, so that's a good thing too.
Exactly, yeah. So it was a couple weeks, and casting called me back, and they said, hey, do you want to do another month and a half of shooting? We're going to have you be part of the Ferrari pit crew for the Le Mans races. So me and 4 other guys were the only ones on set who actually spoke Italian, so we got heavily featured again. We worked, as the pit crew, so when the Ferraris pitted during the race, we filled up the cars with gas, we were... Matt Damon steals our stopwatch at one point, and we go crazy, and speaking Italian and are just flipping out because Matt Damon had stolen our timepiece to, clock the cars and all that. So yeah, it was really a great experience. I got to work with all the main actors and interact with them at some point. And after the first week of shooting, it was really weird coming back to set a couple weeks later for the Le Mans stuff because everybody knew my name. The director, the assistant directors, and everyone on set was like, okay, Jean-Pierre, when Matt Damon does this, we want you to do this. And it was really a confidence booster as an actor, especially doing such a big film. Being on that set, everybody from extras to the main cast and just everyone there, we all had this overwhelming feeling like we were on something special. It just felt like an incredible experience. This is going to be an incredible film. We just all kind of felt it being on set. So yeah, it was a wonderful experience. I got all my SAG vouchers, so I'm eligible to join the Screen Actors Guild now based on what I did in the movie. I even was actually, you can see me on the movie poster, and a lot of my friends hit me up. I didn't realize it till the movie came out or the poster started coming out. Everybody's like, I noticed that jawline anywhere. Jean-Pierre, we found you, dude. You're on the poster. So
what did you think about when you saw yourself on the poster? You had to be freaking out.
I definitely was. A big thing about me and what I've done in my life, it's kind of a dark past where I was pretty severely abused by my family growing up. And I think it took away a lot of my natural confidence that I have in myself, and it caused a lot of doubt. And to break through the way I did with that movie was a profound confidence booster as an actor. And I don't know if it's just because I was in that movie, but I was able to obtain a ton of acting jobs after that. So like the train began with that, and I kept my momentum just by pursuing my passion and going after stuff. And I think that confidence boost I got from being in the movie and having that experience just changed the energy and the way I carried myself. So even when I went to auditions or to sets, I always ended up getting boosted up and featured because I think it was just the way I was. I'm professional when I'm on set. You know, I just keep a positive attitude and I'm there and I'm enjoying the experience. And when people see that, I think they really like that because that's what they like on a set. So yeah, it definitely was an incredible confidence booster. And yeah, to be on the movie poster, to have friends sending me screenshots of the movie, like, dude, is this you? Are you in this movie?
Wow.
Like, oh yeah, that's me.
So the movie Ford vs. Ferrari has a big race scene, and that's where you're talking about you were in the pit crew. Our audience really does enjoy. I get a lot of emails when we get to kind of go behind the scenes of how something is filmed, and I've never interviewed somebody who's been a part of a race scene like in this movie or Fast and Furious and that kind of thing. So can you talk a little bit about the production end about, I mean, obviously we know that film is very slow. Everything on set is very calculated and takes a lot of time to set up, and it's like all of a sudden you blink and you miss the action. So walk us through a little bit about what it was like to film a race sequence. What's it like behind the scenes?
For me, it was really cool. I'll say I'm in that same boat, actually. I've never worked on like a racing movie. You know, I've been on lots of different sets from movies to TV and done different stuff from extra work to featured. But yeah, this is definitely a cool experience for me. I think the first day there was a lot of setup, so there wasn't a lot of racing. So we all got kind of bored because all the cars were there sitting there. We're like, you know, it was just the start of the race. We shot that scene so many times. We're just standing by the pit and waiting for the race to start. And at the end of the day, they finally like shot some beginning race scenes. And it was really incredible because I think, like, you know, in real life, you wouldn't be able to go to NASCAR and be in the pit when the cars are taking off from the pit. But because we were the pit crew, we were literally right behind the cars as they took off. And I mean, these are replica race cars. So, I mean, they have, you know, torqued out engines. They're the real deal. They move really fast. And yeah, to be there and sit in the pit and have the cars just take off. And, you know, they have a long crane shot they were using for those scenes. So they have the crane set up to watch all the cars taking off out of the pit. At the end of the day, everybody's energy just boosted because we're sitting there in the pit and, you know, the Ferrari takes off. And you're just like, in real life, you probably wouldn't have this experience. Like, that's why I love being an actor. You get to experience things like, you know, normal everyday people don't. But there was a lot of actual fast racing, and they used a lot of they had special cars built for Christian Bale's Ford, where there was cameras actually mounted on the front or the back of the car to get those angles. And those still actually moved pretty fast. Obviously, there's a lot more weight with the cameras and all the gear they have to put on those special vehicles. So they did a lot of that. They also had a special like SUV that had a camera crane on top of it and that actually followed the cars and raced behind them and caught all the action. So seeing all of that was really cool too, because again, you don't usually get to see that if you don't work on that type of project. So I got to see a lot of really cool and newer technologies that came out, because they were telling us that a lot of this technology they're using with the cars mounted with the cranes and all that is relatively newer. Before, they had more steady cams that were set up on cars, you know, and they couldn't really do a lot of movement. But now with the technology and, you know, robotics, they're able to move the cameras and catch crazy angles and go, like, you know, put the camera really low, like behind the car, so you see under and the wheels and stuff. So
what do you think the top speed was of these cars? Because I know film can make things a lot faster when they're only going a slow speed. So were we going hundreds of miles an hour?
Yeah, they had stunt drivers, obviously, at certain points when the actors weren't actually driving, the stunt drivers were driving, and they filmed it. They actually, they got up to you know, at least over 100 at certain points when they were filming certain scenes. So this one was really done in that sense. Like I said, certain scenes where they used the cars that had specially mounted cameras, they went a little slower so they could capture certain things.
Right.
But when the cars were running on their own and the stunt drivers were driving, they actually drove them at like top speeds. And we shot this at an old airport that wasn't being used on this airstrip. They built the whole set for the Le Mans. Like, it was crazy, the detail. Like, I heard they put millions into building that set. Wow. So, you know, they had a stretch of concrete to race on and really get up to top speed to shoot those scenes. So yeah, they got pretty fast out there. That's what made it more exciting for us, because there's a lot of waiting around when they're shooting the car stuff, and we're in the background kind of watching the race. But it was still exciting because these cars are going super fast, and you feel like you're at a race.
You mentioned some big names there, Matt Damon and Christian Bale. What are these people like really on set? Like when you had encounters with them, are they personable? Like, does Matt do his scene and go right back to his trailer? Does he hang around? Tell us the behind the scenes of the working actors that are like these A-list celebrities.
I was lucky enough to work with, John Bernthal, Matt Damon, and Christian Bale pretty much almost the entire time that I was shooting the movie. And, John Bernthal and Matt Damon are very personable people. They're fun. They make it funny on set. And a lot of the time, if they're not in the scenes, they're usually in their trailers. But when they're shooting a scene or they have to keep shooting scenes, they're usually there really close. They have their assistants with umbrellas and stuff if it's hot, with food and snacks and all kinds of stuff. But they were really personal. Christian Bale is a much more serious actor, though, seeing him in person. I felt like I didn't really get to see his personality. He's in character. And he's a phenomenal actor, so that's not like a shot at him or anything. But I just felt like with everyone else, like that I dealt with personally, like they had more personality. They were a little more friendly, where like Christian Bale was just very much in his role. He was that character. So he was just doing his thing. And that's kind of the experience, but it was still a great experience. Like I said, Matt Damon had us laughing in between scenes where like stuff wasn't going on. He would crack jokes and like make us laugh. John Bernthal would go up to literally almost everybody on set and talk to them, shake their hand, say hi, have conversations. The set was very friendly and welcoming, and so were most of the A-list actors too. So
Christian Bale's just like a pitcher on MLB Game Day. Don't talk to him. He's in his, he's in the groove. He's getting ready.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's, every actor has their own style of acting, and I think you could definitely tell his style is that, but I mean, like I said, he does a phenomenal job. He did a phenomenal job in the movie. I mean, we were all really impressed by him in general because he had just finished filming the movie Vice before this film, and he had gained weight for that. And he lost a ton of weight. He was very thin on set, and we were all just like, dang, imagine to have to lose that kind of weight in such a short amount of time. Like, even that's an incredible feat. So you can tell how seriously he takes his job.
Yeah, I don't have the willpower for that.
Yeah, I don't know if I would either, to be honest.
Some people know from an early age what they want to be when they grow up. Not only have you chosen to pursue acting, but you're also a performing comedian, rapper, and a paranormal investigator, things I all want to talk about as we go through the show today. So I'm sure you've had a lot of those interests early on, but what made you take the chance at an entertainment career rather than going the traditional 9-to-5 route?
I think I've always just had this passion to express myself differently. And again, I have to go back to kind of the dark side of growing up, is that in my household, I never was able to express myself really, to be who I wanted to be. My abuser was very you're supposed to go to college and get a job and take care of your family. And all these things, so rigid that there was no room left to do art and be expressive. So I really found an outlet, and I really think I survived the amount of abuse I went through because I had outlets to, express myself where I couldn't in the household. So I just had a love for music at a very young age. I always imitated things I saw. I used to imitate Michael Jackson's dance moves and, learn all of them intricately. I used to imitate Groucho Marx and the Marx Brothers when I was really little. And a lot of the comedians I watched and saw, I just imitated them. And people would always find me very entertaining and say I was really good at it. So I think I got positive affirmation from lots of people that I was good. And I think that's why I think I gravitated towards it more than a traditional, job. And I did work a traditional job, funny enough, right before I got Ford versus Ferrari. I worked a regular 9-to-5 for 10 years, and it was soul crushing because it never allowed me to express myself the same way my family didn't. And then I couldn't really pursue other things I wanted to. So definitely I'm sticking to my dreams now more than ever and really pursuing it. So that's really where it comes from. And I think the first taste I got that kind of led me to really pursue it was in junior high. I was very introverted, very young for most of my life. And then in junior high, a counselor said, hey, why don't you get into choir and do some extracurricular stuff? And I was hesitant, but I did it. And there was something different about being on stage and performing that I really liked, and since I was introverted and shy, it worked to be in choir because I wasn't the center of attention. There was a bunch of people in the bass section that, kind of masked my voice. And eventually I started breaking out and doing solos and get into acting and performing on stage, and it just expanded from there. And I just have a real passion for it. I love it. I feel alive when I'm performing. So.
And you also use like your comedy as kind of an expression of how to, or let's call it a form of therapy for you to overcome the abuse that you got from your family. Tell me a little bit about how you're getting over that past trauma through your comedy.
I think one of the biggest things I took out of what I went through, because my abuser was so authoritarian, is I really questioned a lot of authority. And I countered a lot of the abuse with sarcasm and humor. So it was a defense mechanism growing up. But it also turned into humor and comedy, making fun of that type of, aggressive authoritarian mentality and kind of twisting it and turning into something absurd. When you really look at people who are super authoritarian or have that dictator mentality, it's easy to make fun of because they contradict themselves a lot and they say a lot of things that don't make sense. So basically I flip a lot of those things on their head. And it's, giving you kind of a realistic look. And that's how I write my comedy. Like the job I worked for 10 years, I actually worked at Disneyland for 10 years. And some of my best material came out of that because I had so many experiences, not just with the company and the way they treated us, but the way entitled guests came into the park and were very rude and had that attitude and would ask ridiculous things. And so a lot of my stuff came from real life, and I twisted it and made it humorous. And then everybody's had an experience where they worked a job they didn't like or encountered guests that were rude. And when you bring that to an audience and they can relate, you just find more of a connection with your audience. And, it definitely is healing. Music is healing for me as well as comedy. It definitely is healing. And like I said, I use a lot of my materials, like very much inspired, like by people like George Carlin, Dave Chappelle, these people they talk about hot button and controversial issues and they make it humorous. And I definitely feel that that's the way I write my jokes and do my comedy as well.
You performed at a lot of highly sought after comedy venues. Can you think back to any of those shows and tell me some of the weirdest or craziest experiences you might have while doing stand-up on stage? I know sometimes audiences can get really into it more than you want. Have you had a situation like that where it's been hard to control the audience?
Yeah, I think it was when I was young. I started doing stand-up comedy when I was 18, literally fresh out of high school. And, when you're young and you're inexperienced, luckily I was good on stage and I knew how to carry myself. And most people thought I was much older than I was just by my presence on stage. But I was still learning my kind of area of comedy, what works for me, what doesn't. So, I had good and bad shows. And one particular show I did at a club, which I don't think exists anymore out here in California in Huntington Beach, was called the Martini Blues. And this particular evening, this lady was pretty drunk, and she kind of started going off. I was talking about being Italian and kind of making humor about my culture and what it's like growing up Italian and things that, your family does. Mm-hmm. And she was really drunk and she really just kept going and was just like, you're not Italian. Yeah. She just kept saying all this stuff. And I was young at that time and inexperienced, and I didn't really counter her that much. I kind of just became a little self-deprecating and making fun of myself a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I handled it. I wasn't discouraged or upset. I was just kind of this lady's kind of rude. And, the club owner finally took her out and they reprimanded her and all this and that. But here's the strangest thing after the fact. She was significantly older than I was. She was probably at least in her mid to late 40s. So after the show, she was waiting outside for me, and she made a proposal to me. I forget. Her husband was some famous dude who made I'm trying to remember the name of the toilet brand, the urinals they make for commercial use, because that was her last name. Okay. So she gave me her phone number on her receipt and said, "That's my name. My husband's the guy who does this or whatever." He's like, "We have a nice lake house, and you should come out and experience it." And she said it that very provocative tone, and I was just totally weirded out. It's that kind of mentality that when somebody's likes you, they're mean to you. That's kind of what happened to me that night at that comedy show. So it went from a little bit of a disappointing show to okay, that's kind of weird to get that kind of proposal. It didn't seem like you liked me that much, right. And now it seems like you like me a little too much.
Well, along the same lines, I also want to ask you about experiences with other fans, because obviously when you are doing comedy shows, you're right out there. But, people might recognize you from some of the television and film work you've done. So have you had any fan get out of control when they're meeting you, or what's your most memorable encounter with somebody who's recognized you?
I'm not not sure. I mean, the only thing I honestly really sticks out in my mind was I did a really great show at the Brea Improv in Orange County. And this one was funny because, I was opening up for a bigger comedian. He had been on TV. He was, more known than me. And I just had a great set that night. That entire club was on the floor laughing. They thought I was the funniest thing they'd ever seen. So I got out of the club, and literally the whole club was in line to meet me. And the headliner didn't even want to speak to me. He was pissed. He's out there smoking a cigarette, and a few people went up to him. But there was literally a line around the club, and people are just like, "Oh my God, dude, your material was so relatable. Those voices you did were hilarious." And like a lot of people were kind of freaking out. And like, I didn't think I was on that level yet. But that really made me feel like, I've made an impact. And a few people did recognize me from some TV shows I had been in or different things like that, because I was on an episode of Haunted History, and that's one of the most popular episodes when they rebooted that on History Channel. So I mostly recognized from that. It was around the same time the show came out. So a lot of people recognized me from that, and they introduced me as part of my intro with that as well. So okay. I had a few people recognize me from that, but it definitely was crazy to have people who didn't really know me personally kind of freaking out, and to have a whole line around the building just to meet me was like pretty cool.
You mentioned you do voices. In fact, you do over 100 different celebrities. Do you remember who your first celebrity impersonation was, and maybe how did you develop a catalog so big?
Really, I think one of my first ones was Bill Clinton. At the time, I was old enough to kind of recognize and be more involved with politics and what it was going on. So I just kind of messed around and was playing around and be like, "How's it going, everybody?" and my family thought it was hilarious. My friends thought it was in school. When I do it in high school, my friends were like, "Dude, we should find Monica Lewinsky's phone number and have you call her up and like say some stuff to her," and just joking around, because it's like, I'm sure it'd be hard to find her number. But I think that was the first one that really solidified that I was good at doing impressions, and then I just built my catalog over the years. The list includes also accents, different accents from different regions and dialects, and cartoons, celebrities, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, but Bill Clinton, I think, was the first one that really solidified that I was good at doing voices, and then I just built my catalog over time. I learned a lot of impressions by watching other comedians. And somebody in the industry actually told me that that's like kind of a thing a lot of comedians don't talk about, but it's like we recognize the tone of somebody else's voice and how they change it. And that's how we kind of learn impressions. And I feel like most of the time, with the exception of a few, I really learned it from watching other comedians do the impression, and then I was able to get it down. I
think that's really impressive. Have these impressions that you do led to voiceover work where you've used them?
Yeah, definitely have. One of the earliest projects I did when I was in college, I did all the celebrity voices for a play called The Man Who Came to Dinner. The main character has a radio show, and he interviews all these celebrities. So we went in and we recorded all these celebrity voices, Bill Clinton, George Bush, Christopher Walken, all, name them, I did them at the time. And it was really cool. They did the local newspaper did a review of the show, and they, put my name in there and said, Jean-Pierre's, talented. He did all these voices. It was just one guy doing all these things. So that was kind of cool recognition for me at a young age, started doing that voiceover stuff. And I've done a few web series. I've done a few voiceover commercials for radio stations that I worked for. So I've definitely done voiceover work, and I'm a voiceover artist as well.
Well, you and I both have a love for paranormal investigations. Those are television shows that I have a hard time turning off. In fact, I have talked about this on Fancounters before. I was a producer, actually, on a pilot for the Discovery Channel about teen mediums, and we actually filmed the pilot at the site where John Wilkes Booth was killed. And during the filming, It was said that some of the soldiers in the attic of the barn where we were filming hadn't wanted to cross over, but these teen mediums were convincing them to do just that. And I did not see anything. I was watching through the, I forget, the black and white camera, that brings out all the images and stuff.
Oh, the infrared?
Yeah, I didn't see anything on there, but they said that they crossed these soldiers over. So I didn't really, that experience didn't really make a believer out of me, but I know that you've had some paranormal experiences that has made a believer out of you. So kind of wondering, let's start there. What makes you believe in the paranormal? And then what made you want to pursue it to actually get involved interacting with these spirits?
So this is another thing that started at a very young age. I was like 2 years old. I stayed over at my grandmother's house, which wasn't uncommon at the time. I would stay there every once in a while. But this particular time, I woke up in, I don't know, the early morning hours sometime. And my grandfather passed away, on my mom's side, passed away when I was 3 months old. And he appeared in front of the bed I was sleeping in, which subsequently was the bed that he passed away in the home.
Oh, wow.
And I was very young. I didn't know what was going on. I kind of freaked out and started crying and wondering what was happening because he was trying to talk to me, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. And the only way I recognized him was because I seen lots of pictures, and he appeared the way he looked in pictures to me. So when he realized he scared me, it seemed like he was cognizant that he did. So he took off into like the dining room and disappeared through the dining room wall. I ran to my grandmother's room, told her what happened. She calmed me down and said it was just a bad dream and like to sleep it off. And my mom played the same story to me. So I got really quiet, but I started experiencing a lot of that. That was like it was almost like the catalyst to experiencing the paranormal for me. Because after that, I used to see stuff a lot and around different places. And I didn't say much because I figured, hey, my family don't believe me. Who else is going to believe me? And then about 8 years later, they sat me down and had a conversation with me. And they said, look, you were really young. We didn't want to scare you. But our family is very sensitive to this type of stuff. My grandma in Italy experienced things before she came here. My mom experienced lots of stuff throughout her life. And like, it's just kind of the thing we all have to deal with. And that's when honestly the spark of interest hit me really hard, because I was like, how come I meet people who experience it and meet people who don't? Like, that's still my biggest question I'm trying to find an answer to.
Yeah.
But back then there wasn't a lot of TV shows, in the early 90s. Basically, I started reading a lot of books. I would have my mom buy me books on the paranormal and ghosts and UFOs, and I just did as much research as I could. I would watch a few shows that had it, like Unsolved Mysteries would do ghost stories sometimes and UFOs, and like the show Sightings on Fox used to do like, whatever was a half hour to an hour of like UFO sightings and ghost stories and all that kind of stuff. Yep. So those were like the beginnings. Of course, X-Files was a TV show that dealt with all that too. So I watched a lot of that stuff and enjoyed it. And kind of a little funny thing I always say about it, which is true to an extent, I grew up to be a real life Ghostbuster, and my mom went to see the movie right before I was born. And I joked that from the womb I was a fan, of Ray Parker Jr.'s song because, I grew up and I always wanted to have a degree like Dr. Venkman.
Yeah.
He had a PhD in parapsychology, and in 2009 I earned that degree. So it was definitely a proud moment for me. I put a lot of work and time into it. And, I run a nonprofit now and investigate the paranormal. And yeah, I'm just passionate about it. And it's really intriguing and interesting to me to look for the unknown and what most normal people, just like, I think it's similar to pursuing a career in entertainment where you don't want to do the normal 9 to 5. Well, the paranormal is similar to that. You don't want to just live every day and just do regular things. You kind of want to expand your mind and do weird things sometimes. And the paranormal fits that category very well.
Well, and it's something that everybody's interested in because nobody really knows for sure if it's happened or not.
Exactly.
And I know that you've done several dozen independent paranormal investigations. What's the most extreme scenario that you've ever personally encountered?
I know off the top of my head exactly the one that happened and I'll never forget. So I rarely have things happen to me. Most of the time it happens to other people. I've been told by spiritual people I have some sort of authority. So the spirits don't usually mess with me. I don't get physical contact, things like that. I definitely see stuff, but I've never had a lot of extreme things happen. But we did a case in Bellflower, California, and things started off crazy as soon as we arrived at a location. There was a 2-story house. There was a balcony, and a metal chair slid from under the table on the balcony by itself. Nobody was in the house. So, I mean, from the start, we were like, oh, this is going to be an interesting night. If this just started, like, we couldn't even have our cameras up yet and stuff was happening. So we did our investigating. We had a few things happen. A couple people witnessed an apparition of a female in like a dress that was all bloody. And so like they kind of freaked out when they saw that in one of the rooms of the house. We heard a little noises and stuff. But then like around 4 a.m., we took a break. We wanted to get out of the house because not like a lot was happening. And we wanted to see if we leave our equipment inside running, if we capture anything when nobody is in the property.
Right.
So we went to 7-Eleven to get snacks and drinks to kind of stay awake. And literally it was on the dot at 4 a.m. We got back to the house and we just sat outside in the driveway in our cars. And all of a sudden we started hearing Native American chanting. And it echoed through the entire neighborhood. And this is 4 a.m. on a weeknight. We're baffled because it's like we jumped in cars, we ran around the block, we tried to figure out the source, and we couldn't find one. It was just weird. We came back, and we're all looking around, and my wife is part of my team as well. And my wife's missing. And we're like, I thought she was with you. No, I thought she was with you. So we run outside. We see her drink in like the middle of the street of the cul-de-sac. And then we see her at the very end of the block on the corner. So we run up to her and we're like, where were you? We ran right past her. You weren't here. She's like, no, I was here the whole time. Like, no, you weren't. There was a car and a whole group of people that walked by and you weren't there. And she's like, oh, don't worry about it. We'll talk about it later. And it's like, it still was weird because it was about a 15-minute period where she wasn't around. So we went back to the house, started wrapping up our investigation, putting our equipment away. And later in that early morning, the client's sister came home very late. And everybody just got a very weird feeling about her. She kind of like just walked through and didn't really acknowledge us and just had weird behavior as well. So as I'm breaking down one of the cameras on my on the staircase, I brace myself because I feel like this big thing. I'm kind of sensitive, so I felt something coming towards me, and it felt like, I don't know, like a running back was running at me. It was gonna, knock me down. And it's this little petite Latina girl, and immediately when she walks past me, I'm just like, I think she's the source of the activity. Like something's not right because I just got a really weird feeling. And for some reason, her eyes were fixated on me while I was breaking down all the equipment, moving around the house. I went behind walls and like literally her gaze was just on me the whole time. Wow. And I kept getting more uncomfortable. And so finally I had a piece of equipment I had to put away in one of our bags, and it was right next to her on the couch. And I'm like, okay, whatever, maybe it's just I'm tired, who knows. I go put the piece of equipment in the bag and I catch eyes with her for maybe 10 seconds. Immediately my chest tightens up, my eyes start watering, and I can't breathe. And it was the first time I ran out of a house. I had to. I felt in danger at that moment. So as soon as I passed the threshold out of the door, I could breathe again. And my wife ran out after me. She checked if I was all right. I said, I'm fine, but I don't want to go back in there because I don't know what's going on and what's causing this. So we broke down our equipment, started getting ready to leave. We talked to the client, and I asked the client, hey, I feel a weird vibe from your sister. Do you know if she's involved in something? Well, she's like, well, I think her and her coworkers do witchcraft on each other because they've had like their combs stolen and like personal items. And like, I think she does witchcraft and stuff like that. And it's like, we encounter a lot of cases where activity started from people who mess with that kind of stuff and don't know what they're doing. So, they open up doors and things can come in and out, or whatever deals they made to have supernatural powers. And we were like, yeah, we think that that's the reason. And so the next morning, me and my wife woke up, and I had a circular burn mark on my chest where I felt the tightness. And my wife's wristwatch was exactly 15 minutes behind, the exact amount of time she was missing for. And she said that she was standing in the corner, and all of a sudden everything got black, and she felt like almost like an animal was breathing in her face. But she couldn't see anything. So that's where she disappeared through some, I don't know what, another dimension or something. I don't even know. And then I had the circular burn mark on my chest. So that was one of the most intense, because I don't have things like that happen ever, either before or after that. I've never had anything like that happen. So it was a very intense experience, and to have, an actual mark from it was even more intense.
Do you think that you have to be a believer in the paranormal to have an encounter or an experience? Like, people have said, well, you're not really a true believer. That's why you didn't experience anything. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my theory after studying a lot of psychology and human behavior is a lot of us in general, I'm going to start with just normal human behavior and ways of thought. A lot of us have blinders on. We're formed by society, by our families, by religion, and we're really formed to think a certain way. And I think if you don't expand your mind out of the systems that kind of try to control us, then you really only have one way of seeing things. And even logical people who have had paranormal experiences are so logical, they'll find a way to explain it, even if you can't really explain it naturally. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what happens a lot. It's the mindset of things are a certain way, and that's how I like it, and I'm comfortable with things this way. And if you take something I believe in and turn it on its head, I don't like that. People are not comfortable with expanding into things they don't understand. Mm-hmm. Okay. I think it's the same thing with racism. A lot of that comes from fear that's created by images we see, by things we're told. And I think the paranormal is very much the same. So I think we all are capable of it. I just think that the way we think, the way we're brought up and formed, it creates blinders, and we have like a tunnel vision for certain things, and we just ignore certain things that happen.
Now, my tongue-in-cheek but yet serious question for you, Jean-Pierre, is why do ghost hunts only happen at night?
I have a legitimate reason for it. Some people just do it because they've seen it, but the evening time things are a lot calmer. There's usually a lot less electricity use that might interfere with activity that may be going on. So nighttime just seems to be a calmer place to do it. Also, there was a study that was done that people have looked into. The human body expels a lot of energy while it's resting at night, especially when you're in deep REM sleep. Your body's actually recovering from the day. And that energy being expelled it can be used by these supernatural entities to like manifest and do more when there's not as much going on around them. So that's some of the theories of why nighttime is better. But you can do it any time of the day, to be honest. You don't have to just do it at night. It just seems to be almost a little different at night sometimes compared to the daytime.
As a performer, you've also released several rap albums. You made a reference earlier to your Disney years, and I think some of your raps are about that experience. As a white man getting started in rap, did you find that the industry was welcoming? Were you kind of shunned? What was your experience starting out?
Starting out, it wasn't too bad. I think really when I started to take it serious and actually go out to LA and like battle at the clubs and perform and do different things, the environment was growing, and Eminem was already popular by that time, so everybody kind of accepted having lighter skin, not being so much of a minority, as much of a problem as they did. I mean, you always encounter people who think like, this is my culture's thing or this is my thing, and they don't really embrace you. But to be honest, if you have skill and talent and you can prove yourself in that environment, you earn respect that way. And for me, that's what I did. Essentially coming in, battling other rappers, freestyling off the top of my head, people saw that I had that skill and I could hold my own, even against some of the best battlers in LA. Even if I lost, I would leave the battle and people were like, dude, that was some dope verses. Like, yo, you came at that guy. So a lot of it, I think it's like anything in life. You have to prove yourself. You put yourself in the line of fire and you stand up to those bullies who may not accept you, and they'll have respect for you for standing up for yourself and holding your own. So there definitely is, and there's still a stigma about it. But overall, I've always been told that, because lyrically I can hold my own. I'm good at putting songs together. I'm good at putting rhymes together. That's really how you earn respect, just by learning the craft and doing it well. So I didn't have too much of a hard time. Definitely encountered stuff once in a while, but luckily I was able to prove myself and get respect of some of the bigger names that have more influence in the community. And they're like, yo, Pierre's dope. Like, he's cool. Check him out.
You've got a lot of songs on your website, which is mcpierre.com. And a lot of these are some of the Disney songs, right, that you wrote about your experiences there?
Yes, correct.
So tell me about that. Like, what made you start rapping about Disney?
Not being able to express myself most of my life, I used my outlets like music and comedy to do it. I was frustrated at Disney. That company is really weird. You really have to be a yes man to move up in that company, and I butted heads with the higher ups on a constant basis. I called them out in their BS and things that they did. So, I definitely wasn't liked in that sense. And I had lots of issues with certain people, and my frustration just built and built. And I said, you know what? Instead of being destructive, I'm going to be creative. So let me do this album. So I sampled some of their music, chopped it up, made my own beats out of it, and created a whole album called the Mocky Mouse LP. And I rap about what it's like to really work at Disney. I don't sugarcoat it. I talk about how we feel just like numbers there. They don't pay us well. They don't treat us well. And how they run, basically like a corrupt monopoly does. So I really called them out. And I flipped their whole magic on its head by saying, it's not magical at all, actually.
Has anyone contacted you about the fact that you're a disgruntled employee and you're releasing stuff like this? I would think that, for a company that has the financial funds that they have, maybe they would have tried to put a kibosh on your music.
Yeah, no, thankfully they haven't. I think one of the biggest things when I first did the album before I released it digitally, I just sold it to my fellow employees at work. And that was the test, because it kind of goes back to proving myself as a rap artist. People heard the album and they loved it. They're like, dude, you're a dope rapper. You made these beats. They sound tight too. And so nobody snitched on me. They're like, honestly, you're not lying. Nobody said that I fabricated anything I said on that album. They're all, you're literally talking about exactly how this company runs. So I think I hit a note with everyone so much that nobody really snitched on me when I first initially released it in physical, form to my coworkers. And then eventually I just kind of expanded out, made a couple music videos when I left the company and, officially digitally released the album. And the only thing they did was they slapped a copyright on one of my music videos because I sampled one of the Haunted Mansion soundtrack and chopped it up and made a beat out of it.
Oh, okay.
But they didn't ban it or block it. They just said, if you make money, we're going to make money off it too. I'm like, whatever, at least.
Well,
if I make money off putting you down, I'm happy with that.
They want their piece too.
Exactly. That's all they care about, really.
So tell us where, well, I guess I gave the website away, which is mcpierre.com. What other social media networks do you have where we can follow your career?
So my handle on social media is @talentedid. That's talented with the extra ED. I created that word because I do so much. I didn't think talented did me justice. So I created Talentedid to show that extra layer of talent that I have and everything I do. So yeah, you'll find me on Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff where I post a lot. I have a pretty big following on Instagram and I post frequently on there. But yeah, the main website is mcpierre.com. That's the letter M, the letter C, PIERRE.com.
Yep. And you also run this 501c3 nonprofit, which is called the Southern California Paranormal Detectives. And you're actively still kind of helping people out, right?
Yeah, definitely. Because of our lives, my wife's going to college now, and like a lot of my friends have gotten different jobs, and obviously the quarantine has slowed a lot of things, but we do a lot more consulting. But if people need help, we still investigate and go out and do that. But yeah, we still do a lot of consulting, through email and phone and talk with people and assist them with what they're dealing with. So yeah, and that's paranormaldetectives.org is the name of that website if you want to check out that paranormal stuff.
Well, you brought your A game for us today, and I really appreciate it. I wish I had brought my A game. I made several gaffes, but the audience won't hear those. But I do appreciate you joining me on Fan Counters this week. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. I had a wonderful time, and have a great day.
My thanks to Pierre Giagnoli for joining us on the show this week. Hope you check out his music, his acting. If you haven't seen Ford vs. Ferrari, what are you waiting for? It's a great film. Go check that out as well. As I mentioned at the top of the show, if you want to email us with any questions, comments, or if you have a celebrity guest that you want to hear on the show, send it in. And if you do and I get them on the show, I'll make you a part of the episode. You can do that by emailing hello@fancounters.com. Have a great week, everybody. We've got another celebrity guest joining us next week, and you won't want to miss it. See you next Friday, everybody. Bye-bye.